The Bothy Storytelling Podcast is a member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. Welcome to the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Calum Lykan, and here we are again with another episode of the Bothy Podcast, and this one is another one about Vikings. Let's be honest, Vikings is a huge part of my life, and over the summer I travel all over the province doing Viking events, but this year was a bit more special because I got to go all the way over to Gimli in Manitoba for one of the larger Viking events in Canada. And it was a phenomenal event. So that's what this episode is going to be about. It's going to be about Vikings, it's going to be about Gimli, it's going to be about some exciting and crazy times we had there. But before we get into that, let's have a wee quick word from one of our sponsors. If you're starting to build a business, ATB's Entrepreneur Centre is a great resource. They can help with banking and set you up with a mentor. There are also opportunities for networking and workshops to help make local connections within the community. Just another way ATB will always be more than a bank. Visit our locations in Edmonton and Calgary and Lethbridge. For more information, head over to ATB's website or just head down to one of their sites. I know for a fact that this month and next month I'm going to a lot of their workshops. One's about developing business, social media marketing, just loads of great things to help me develop. So I highly recommend ATB's Entrepreneur Centre, and certainly the one in Calgary that I'm familiar with is an incredibly welcoming and friendly place. Vikings, a huge part of my life. I love doing it. I've spoken about them on a couple of previous episodes. You know all about the Vikings Vinland. You know all about Vesterheim Vikings in Calgary, Heimdall's and Red Deer, and Odin's up in Edmonton. But this year, we all travelled out east, heading towards Manitoba and Gimli. You know, it's a beautiful place. If you've never been to Gimli, before we even kick off, it's just this lovely little lakeside town, and it's really set up for tourism. You know, as soon as I arrived, it really reminded me of like one of the places from one of those horror movies or one of those great movies like Jaws. It just had that really nice, friendly feel to it. You know, beautiful restaurants, bars, just a fun little place. But there was something about it, and it just reminded me like of Jaws. And I was just waiting for something terrible to happen. And to be honest, I didn't actually need to wait that long. You see, we all arrived and set up. It's a huge event, Gimli Viking Festival. It lasts for 4 days, but it's about 1.5 days to set up the village. We set up right in the harbour park, and there's so many people come that it takes so long for this event to be set up. So we all arrived as one of the first groups, and we started setting up our little Vesterheim camp. And then slowly over the next day, more people trickled in. And I believe at the end, they were saying there was about 60 units set up, 60 camps, tents. You know, it was just such a beautiful big event. And as always, everyone's crafting. As always, everybody's fighting in the combat arena. I get to host it and announce it, which is beautiful. But we get to do all our wonderful crafts and learn off each other. And then at night, we hang around the campfires. Now, to be honest, I didn't do as much of that this time because I was working on a few things, but still trying to create something for the Edmonton Fringe. And also, there was a lot of new people, and you know, you sometimes don't want to impose on their campfire until you're invited. You know, I won't lie, I wasn't in the most social mood for Gimli. There was a lot of stuff in the air. One of the biggest things about Gimli was we were actually having our election this year for the new Hertog, the new leader of Vinland. So there was a lot of tension in the air when it came to Gimli, which, you know, for my first ever Gimli, it probably put a wee bit of a dark downer on it. It was a difficult one in that sense because there was a lot of politics going on, and when you go to do a hobby, you cannot be bothered with politics, and you can't help but getting dragged in sometimes. The other downside was the gentleman who was stepping down was actually one of my really dear friends. He was stepping down because after 13 odd years of running the society, he decided, he needs to focus on himself and his family and a bit more fun. So it was a sad time as well, but there was a lot of negativity and craziness going on. And you know what? Whoa, the Scotsman in me wanted to come out. Oh, I'll tell you, there was a few tight reins on me that weekend. My partner and a lot of the guys there were just like keeping me on a leash to make sure the Scottish didn't explode. But it was quite good. It was a fun event, but what made it better is we actually had the king of the whole Viking society. This is from the UK, come over with a couple of the guys. And, oh man, you know what? Having those guys there reminded me why I love doing Viking events. There are times that I just can't be done with it because of the nonsense, because it's an expensive hobby. But when you meet the guys from the UK and they come over, you just have such a blast. I loved meeting the guys. And also it was nice having the British humour back. Canada, I love you. I really do. I've said it many times. You're the most beautiful people on this planet. You're loving, you're friendly, you've got your own sense of humour. The problem is, so does the UK, so does Scotland and England, and our sense of humour is just hellish to deal with. It's really dark, it's really difficult, and unless you're from the UK, you just sometimes think we're being, assholes, to be honest. And that's the problem. So I got this lovely 4 days of literally being able to rip living hell out of these guys and get it back from them, have that sass and abuse, and it was just a wonderful experience, folks. I mean, it gave me a little bit of missing home, but Canada is really now my home, so it was just that nice moment of needing that. But I got to meet the guys, Dan and Joe. Sorry, Joe, if you're listening to this. Honestly, mate, you guys, Dan and Joe, were just phenomenal. They were some of the King's Guard, and of course, we've got some of the King's Guard. So me being me, doing the scald thing, I just couldn't help but play them off each other and wind each other up, and also risk my own life, because our king, Roger the King, and I keep doing the salute now. Oh my God, the cheeky, I didn't vote for him. Sort of idea. But Roger the King came over. What's his name? His Viking name has escaped me again. I've still got a story to do for him. This is the thing. So let me explain. I basically always play up doing the scald, but when I'm doing the Viking stuff, I do it. And I was once told that I'm actually quite a decent draw, and the guys appreciate having me there, which I was really honoured with, because when you're new to these events and you step in, the fight arena and all that's huge. But they were actually saying to me it was really nice having a couple of extra things to draw people in. And apparently I am one of those things that people come to listen to the stories. So I'm really honoured when I do the Viking thing, because I can give something back to the society. So when I was at Gimli, I was hamming it up. I'm sorry, I was milking it for everything I could. And having Roger the King there just gave me extra basically, I was firing shots. I couldn't help it. I was firing shots at the King, because as a Scotsman, we bend the knee to no one. Roger, you're a man of history. Great respect to you, and you knew exactly what was happening, and that's what I loved about him. He knew that I was not going to cow down to him. He didn't expect it, but in character, you're supposed to give a little bit more. Of course, there's me talking about his flaccid buttocks and how he did nothing all day, and telling telling kids to go up and harangue him when he's up in his court. And you know what? It got me back. I was having so much fun. I remember this wee laddie came up, or was that a wee lassie? God, I can't remember now. And they were chatting away to me, asking me about stories, and I told them a few wee stories and just having fun. And then I said, now, do you know who else is in this village? The King is here, and you need to go up and see the King. He's up in the tent, but you need to tell him that he needs to get off his butt and do something. Words to those effects. And, I couldn't believe it. The kid ran up there and actually challenged the King. And when the King said who'd sent him, well, guess who the kid threw under the bus? Next thing I know, two of the soldiers, the King's Guard, are dragging me through the crowds up to the king's court, where I have to stand in front of him and, basically get accused of this, which was hilarious. Now, I got away lightly because thankfully doing this stuff is just so much fun. So my penalty was I had to regale the crowds with a story of the king's exploits, which were very hard because at that point he hadn't done much. But what was even better, I got dragged up for dissent and speaking out against the king. But before I told a story, I forced them to pay me coin because that's what a king does. If you have a skald or a storyteller going to regale the audience and enhance their prowess, they need to pay for it. And Roger played along beautifully. So I actually got a couple of wee souvenir King's coins from him as well. And as a result, I do actually need to record a proper story for him. So Roger is coming. It's just I was waiting on this studio getting built, which I don't know if you guys can hear in this recording. It's developed a weird echo coming from somewhere. I can't figure it out. You might not hear it, but I'm picking up this weird echo and I'm trying to isolate it. Hopefully it won't ruin your enjoyment of this Bothy podcast, and hopefully I'll have it eliminated. Probably have to do a couple more like this, and then I'll strip a few things back and see if I can find where this thing is. It's probably not being picked up. I hope it's not, but it's just, you know what? The more I get used to this studio, the wee things do my head in. So, Gimli was brilliant, working with Roger the King, whatever his name was. Jeez, I'll remember it at some point. But it was a phenomenal time and we had great time. So getting pulled up in the King, I'm telling the story, it's all fine. But I can't help it. I keep doing stuff throughout the weekend and literally get myself into trouble with the King because I'm no bending my knee to this man. You know, I just can't do it. I'm Scottish. We don't bend our knee to any king. There was only a couple of kings that were worthy. I spoke about one of them in the last episode. And 7th of November, Outlaw King. Oh, God, I'm ranting about it again, folks. Sorry. I actually saw an advert for Outlaw King. What can I say? What the hell is that accent? Seriously. I mean, no Scot... Well, yeah, there are Scottish people that speak like that, probably. But, I mean, really, it's a pretty piss-poor accent. I mean, listen, I know mine's probably not the best. I've only been working on it all my life. But, you know, it takes a while to practice and get used to the Scottish accent. But anyway, back to Gimli. Sorry, rant over. It was amazing. We had some great days. It was fantastic. But it was also a crazy time. I started watching, I've always loved these shows. You know these tornado hunter dudes that travel about and they chase tornadoes up and down America and Canada? Yeah, and quite often they miss tornadoes. Yeah, they need to have me coming along. I seem to be a tornado magnet. I'm just saying. The first night we're camped out. No, in fact, that's a lie. The first night of the event, we're camped out. And we get warning there's a bit of a storm coming in. The clouds are greying. We're beside the lake. So we all batten down the hatches. And when the big gusts come, we make sure everything's secured. It's crazy. The winds. Then the rain starts and everything's going crazy. And it was just like, wow, this is mental to be camping out. In this, you know, me coming from Scotland who's done very little camping and now I'm camping out in a big storm. The lightning is ripping across the sky and of course all the guys are shouting, Thor, Thor, which, you know, as a storyteller, I love people having belief systems, but just get a grip, guys, you know? It gets a wee bit cultish at times when people are starting to shout, Odin and Thor, and I love these guys, but geez, you know, calm your beans, laddies. Calm your beans. So they're all screaming for Thor and they're all giving it well, but it was beautiful. You're inside this tent and it's like you didn't need lights. The light show coming from outside was phenomenal. The tent is whipping and billowing and me and my good lady, we're trying to sleep and she's pretty good. She's kind of falling asleep and I'm not going to lie. I'm lying in bed crapping myself. I'm thinking, what is going on? Is this going to be the end of me? The winds were howling. You could hear chaos outside. It was amazing. And then about 1 a.m, the rain is thundering down. The lightning is ripping the skies. The wind is buffeting the tents. And all of a sudden, the door of our tent kind of bounces against the cots that we're sleeping in. And we're like, what's happened? And some of the pegs had been ripped out the earth. So I run out to fix them, to turn round and see chaos. Because of the high winds, we couldn't hear what had been happening. But across the campsite, our good friend Nick, he was on one of the higher grounds. His tent was illuminated and I saw him inside, huddled, like in a kind of crouching position. I couldn't figure it out until I saw someone outside his tent hammering. And as I looked around, I saw more people running about hammering. It turned out Nick had been holding his tent in place for about 45 minutes, screaming into the night for help, and even the guys next to him couldn't hear him because of the wind howling and the storm raging. Nick was exhausted, and eventually his tent basically blew down. We had to just take it down. But as we were taking that down, I'm hammering mine in place, and we're running about like crazy, and then out of nowhere it appears, and I always remember this moment, because Roger had gone away. He'd disappeared for the night with some of the older gents, and they were just chatting away. So none of us knew he was back, so I'm hammering my tent in place, my partner's running about helping out, and the next thing I see, like the vision of Thor himself, hammer in hand, he appears beside me, frantically hammering in pegs, running about, heroically saving the camp. You know, it's one thing to say I'm the king of a Viking society, but it's another to get your hands dirty like this man does. He leads by example, so I've got to be honest, I give the man such respect. But we're running about, soaking wet, the wind's howling, it's now 2 a.m, we're trying to save one tent, and then it happens. We hear this almighty gust, there's a scream and a yelp, and an explosion. One of the A-frames, these things are heavy. If you've ever seen a Viking sort of tent, they've got the wooden triangle at the front, wooden triangle at the back. They've got big beams down the base sides and a beam along the top. This thing took to the heavens. We reckon it lifted about 6 to 10 feet up and travelled at least another 10 foot across. And when it hit the earth, it exploded. We could not believe our eyes. We run over, and there's the poor souls that had been sleeping in it. They had no idea. They just were looking up into the dark, stormy night now. They didn't realise what had happened. It was all so fast. But we're losing tents. They're ripping open. They're blowing away. It is a crazy night. And it was about 2-3 hours we're out there hammering, plugging away, weighing down tents, supporting everything we could, until eventually we had done everything we could. We were exhausted. Some people had gone to the library, the old folks' home had opened their doors to us, but the rest of us stayed in camp because we needed to make sure that everything would be safe. So I remember going back to bed with my partner. We're wet, we're cold, we're exhausted, we're sore, and the wind's still howling, and I'm just lying in bed looking at the beam of our Gateld bending in the wind. Eventually, the winds must have died. I drifted off. And the next morning we woke up. Oh, and it was chaos. Because the next day was Saturday. It was the biggest day of the event. So we all had to get up stupidly early after very little sleep, sore and achy. We had to rebuild the whole place. The perimeter fence was down. The fight field was blown over. We had to rebuild all the tents. People had to go and buy wood to try and get other tents put back up. It was just a crazy time. But do you know what? It was a great time. I look back at that and it was so scary. You know, there we are running about the place in the rain, hammering in stakes, trying to save tents, getting blown about, bits of shrapnel flying by our heads. But we were all loving it. We were all there working together and supporting each other. And it was just phenomenal. And of course, the next morning when the weather reports come in, that's when we discover a tornado had dropped down. I think it was about between 50 and 100 kilometres away from us, so still a wee bit away. But that is what had caused all the chaos. So to any storm hunters out there chasing those tornadoes, give me a call. because apparently I'm a bit of a tornado magnet. And if Gimli has anything to go with it, certainly I can find you some tornadoes. But Gimli was great. I loved it. The Saturday was phenomenal. Fight fields, entertaining the crowds, having great fun, sitting round the campfire at night. Just fantastic times. The Viking Society then had its AGM at the end. And I won't lie, it wasn't a nice experience. Never before have I seen such bitter people in my life not acknowledge a man for stepping down and for all the work he's done. All they did was attack the previous leader. The new leaders were nominated, they cheered and roared, and that was fine, the new people are stepping in. But there wasn't much grace throughout the whole thing. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to, point out to anyone. People did show great grace and respect, others didn't. And I was just a wee bit sad about that. The sneers, the venom. Yes, people might not have been happy, but you know what? After someone's done a job for a certain amount of time, just let them step out with a little bit of niceness. But there was a few people I could have stuck my head in that night, and it was odd that I had so many people surrounding me again that night to stop me. But we are now with a new Hertog. We're under a new era. Let's hope that things go smoothly. Hopefully they will. I mean, you just never know until kind of they find their footing. It's been a few months. We've not heard much, but you know what? They're probably still finding their footing. But Viking Vinlands is still ticking away. The Vikings are great. Gimli was an amazing experience. And I would recommend, if anyone is there, head along to Gimli. But do bear in mind, if you're listening to this in Calgary, we do have Vesterheim Vikings. So do come along, find our website, find our Facebook page, and, get in touch and come along to one of our events or come along and meet us and join the group if you're interested. Red Deer have Heimdall Spears and Edmonton have Odin's Ravens. They don't need plugged. They're big enough. Come to Calgary. We're a much nicer group. We're a small group. We're growing. But definitely we need new bodies, we need new blood. So if you're interested in the Viking Age reenactment life, come and join us. I won't lie to you, it's not a cheap hobby, folks, but it is a fun hobby. So I highly recommend it. That is all about Gimli, the fun of Gimli. Our next events won't be now until next year. I know we're getting booked for Okotoks already. We may be doing Vikings in the streets again. There might be a few others, Cochrane Medieval Day. These are all events we do. So come and see us. Come and become a Viking. It's an amazing time. I love it. I have great fun doing it. I get to do what I love, telling stories. I need to get a couple more of the crafts going as well, learn a few new skills. I don't think I'll ever be on the fight field, folks. I'm falling apart. I won't lie to you. I need to actually speak to my dear ma back in Scotland and see if there's any family history or problems. But I'm losing my elbows. It's almost like a really bad case of tennis elbow all the time, which is meaning I'm probably not going to be able to fight for too long. I'll see if I can get back into the archery, at least offer my hand on the combat in some way. But I highly recommend the Vikings. I highly recommend Gimli. A fun time. Great thanks to all the guys that came over from the UK from Gimli. It was amazing. It just, it made me feel a wee bit of the old home. The abuse, the fun. Dan, Joe, Roger. Thanks very much, Roger. I know you won't listen to this, thankfully, because I'll probably get into more trouble. But I promise you I'll get that story created. I might even make a wee video and post it out for you guys over there. I'm not going to lie, I'll probably be taking the mick out you a wee bit. That's just my way. I'm in Canada, you're in the UK. Mate, it's going to cost you a bit to come and get me. So I'm going to... oh, God, did I just threaten the king? Aye, Calum, you're doing well today. Yeah, Dan and Joe will probably fly over just to pull me out in front of the king again. Aye, they would probably enjoy that. So anyway, Roger, you didn't hear anything. That's all I'm going to say. I wasn't talking about you. I wasn't talking about, the Vikings or anything or any abuse I gave you. All the coins that you paid me that I still haven't actually given service for with the story that I owe. Technically, I could just not, but I'll get that story recorded. Regale them with your great prowess in combat. I believe the nickname he's been given occasionally is the Suicide King for his heroic charges. And I'll tell you, for an old bugger, Roger can fight. Jeez, that man just weighs in, and it's phenomenal to watch. Great respect to you guys. Great love. Gimli was fantastic. Folks, I hope you get along to one of these Viking events over time because they are just so much fun. But let's move on. So what should we do now next, folks? You know what? Let's have a wee story. That's probably the next thing. Then we'll have our book and our podcast review. So we've spoken about water, we've spoken about storms, we've spoken about Thor and hammers. So you know what? Let's do it. There's only one Thor story that I think ties in beautifully with all this, and that's Thor goes fishing. You see, even a god like Thor gets bored with his usual habits, which you know is killing giants. So Thor decides it's time to hunt a different prey. And he gets it in mind that he wants to go fishing. But Thor knows there is only one person that can help him with his desires to fish, and that is the great giant Hymnir, the most renowned fisherman in all the realms. And Thor is a giant killer. So of course this isn't going to work. So Thor decides to disguise himself. He takes off his usual clothing and places clothing of silks and satins and velvets. He ties back his hair, he braids his beard and places ribbons in it until Thor looks in the mirror and sees a dandy, a merchant, a gentleman, not fierce Thor. He slips Mjolnir into his tunic and starts his journey, travelling across the realms, heading to Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, and heading towards the home of Hymnir. After a few days in the distance, he sees a wee cottage by the sea, surrounded by a giant herd of cattle. This is the home of Hymnir, the fisherman who has prize cattle. Well, Thor walks up and knocks on the door, and it's opened by a huge, miserable and mean-looking fellow. Hymnir hates company. He hates everything. All he likes is his cattle and to go fishing. So he sees this wee man on his door. I need a place to stay. And Hymnir's, no, you're no welcome here. I don't like guests. But Thor insists, knowing that there is an unwritten rule that you must welcome a stranger into your home. Hospitality is to always be given. And Hymnir knows this, so he tries everything he can to dissuade this fop of a man. You know, my house is a mess. You won't be comfortable here. The bed's made of stone. You'll no get a good night's sleep. The cattle bray all night. You'll never get a wink. All you'll do is be disturbed all night. But all these Thor just dismisses. He's happy to stay. I'm heading off fishing at the first crack of dawn. I'll wake you up. And this is what Thor was waiting on. As soon as he hears that, he's like, you know, I don't mind. I wouldn't mind getting up early to come fishing. And Hymnir is miserable at hearing this. He's tried everything he can to dissuade this man and eventually welcomes him in, shows him to a back room and says, there's your bed. But Hymnir's now thinking, fishing? I don't want company when I'm fishing. So he says, I'm up too early for the likes of you. You won't enjoy it. The sea's too rocky. But again, everything he says, Thor has an answer for. So that night, Thor sleeps and Hymnir sits up thinking how to get round this. And he comes up with an idea so simple, I'll just get up earlier. I'll get my chores done and I'll be gone before this guy's even risen. And that's what he does. The next morning, he gets out of bed. He creeps out his cottage. He heads round to where his cattle are to milk them, and there his heart sinks as he sees this traveller standing there waiting. Well, he's going to have to take him, he knows it, but he's still got chores to do, so he milks his cattle, and out the corner of his eye, he sees this man, and he thinks, and then it comes to him. Well, if you're going to join me fishing, you're going to need some bait. Head over there and fish about for some bait. And what Hymner does is he points towards the huge dung pile that the cattle have left, thinking the man will have to wriggle about in it for worms, and this fop will never agree to this. But Thor starts to walk across. But you see, Thor only notices the kind of pointing and doesn't realise that Hymner was actually directing him towards the dung pile. For milling about in that area are some beautiful cattle, and Thor walks up to the biggest bull he can find, pulls out his sword, and with one cleave takes the head of the bull clean off. Dragging the head back to Hymner, he says, I've got my bait. And Hymner is furious. One of his prize cattle has just been slain. This impudent creature has killed one of his finest. But he knows he can't do anything. Hospitality says you can't kill a guest in your house. And then it comes to Hymner. It says that about killing in your house. It doesn't say about killing them out to sea. Sure, this wee man can travel with me. I'll take him out to the oceans and I'll get rid of him out there. So when all the chores are done, giant and man head down to the boat, and Thor offers to row. Hymner scoffs. Such a puny wee thing won't row for long. And Thor starts, and Hymner can't believe how fast they're skimming across the water. Never before has he seen such a puny creature row so powerfully. Eventually, they're at his favoured fishing grounds. This'll do. Stop here, says Hymner. But Thor says, no, come on, a wee bit further. We'll row out a wee bit further, and that's what they do. And the waves get higher and more rocky. The boat starts to get flung about, and Hymner says, we need to stop. We're going out too far. But again, Thor is no. We'll head out further. We'll just go out a wee bit further. The waves are rolling. A thunderstorm is appearing overhead as Thor takes them deeper out into the ocean, until eventually Hymner cries out, you must stop! You must stop! We're entering the realm of the world serpent. And that's when Thor stops. He has arrived at his destination, the realm of Jormungandr, the great world serpent. Thor looks about the waters, finds himself in the boat, the heaviest rod, the thickest line and the biggest hook. He takes the bull's head and slams the hook through it, and with one toss throws it to the waves. And down, down, down it sinks into the water. At the bottom of the ocean, the great world serpent slumbers. His nostrils start to twitch as the blood scent comes to him through the water. His great eyes open as he sees, not far ahead, dangling a bull's head, the blood so tasty smelling. And with one gulp, he crunches down on the head, the hook immediately pinning into his upper mouth. He's roaring and bellowing and thrashing about in anger and pain. The world serpent tugs on the line, and Thor feels that tug. He starts to wind in his line, fighting furiously with his prey. The waves start to rock and roll above their heads. Thunder and lightning rip open the skies. Thor, straining away, starts to slowly wind in the world serpent. Hymner the giant can't believe his eyes, begging this man to stop such foolishness, as all of a sudden, coming through the water, rising above the waves, is the head of the world serpent. Bloodied eyes, teeth as long as a man's arm, a mouth spitting venom and bile, the smell of rotting corpses coming through the air. And on seeing this, Hymner faints, falls into a swoon. But Thor is not daunted, continually pulling and pulling on his line, bringing the beast closer and closer to him. Thor reaches into his tunic to pull out Mjolnir to deliver the killing blow. But just at that moment, the giant Hymnir regains consciousness, looks up above him to see the head of Jormungandr leering down, and the giant can take no more. Panic fills his soul. He reaches for a knife and starts to cut at the line of Thor. And snap, the line breaks. Thor stands there, hammer raised high, about to deliver the blow, when all of a sudden his prey slowly slithers and dips back into the water. The waves that were rolling so high start to calm. The thunder and lightning above their heads eases as Thor looks at an empty space of water which once held his prized possession, his prized prey. He looks down at Hymnir. Rage and anger in his eyes, thunder and lightning now filling the skies from a different source. Thor is furious. He has been cheated and he needs to vent. With one mighty lash, he sends Hymnir flying through the air and splashing into the oceans, down into the depths, never to be seen again. But Thor is furious. Never before has he been cheated on a hunt. He rows back to land, and there at Hymnir's home, he destroys the cottage. He slays the cattle, but still his anger is unabated. He starts to head home, wrenching the ribbons, tearing off the silk and satins. Thor's fury is unbound. He walks across the realms, being followed in the heavens by thunder and lightning. And eventually he sees the walls of Asgard, and all the gods know something is amiss. Thor's fury is there. They can see it in the heavens. So when Thor enters the gates of Asgard, none bother him. And it's said that Thor goes to his abode, and there he stays, never to be seen, for 2 weeks, until eventually the skies slowly clear, and everyone knows that Thor's anger has been sated. And Thor was angry for many weeks, furious at losing his prey, but never ever did he ever hunt Jormungandr again, and it was said that he never ever went fishing from that day on. Thor goes fishing. Fantastic, fun story, great for all the family, and I love telling it. I've told it in many, many events. Normally I have my Skaldic staff to emulate the fishing rod, but sometimes you just don't need that. But after a great story of Thor going fishing, let's move on to our book review for this episode, sponsored by Calum Lykan Storytelling. Yes, I'm sponsoring my own book reviews, folks. Cheap tactic, but hey, you gotta love me. Now, the book that I really want to talk about this time is one that I gained a lot of stories from. I've spoken about Neil Gaiman and I've spoken about other Viking and Norse books, but this one is fantastic, and it's an old book that I got in Edinburgh. The story behind it, I'm not going to lie, I actually bought it for a young lady. We were in our second-hand bookshop. This is before I was storytelling, and she picked it up and she loved it, so I got it for her. And then when we separated, she threw it at me. Yeah, weird story. I don't know why. She decided that she didn't want any memory of me. And I got this huge, very thick, heavy book flung at me. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of grateful for that now. You know, it nearly took my eye out. But I'm now grateful that I got this book, and it's Teutonic Myth and Legend by Donald A. Mackenzie. Now, this is a really fantastic book. It's one of these old sort of collection books. It's got some lovely prints all the way through. But for the Norse tales, it's just filled with it. From the story of creation, the 9 worlds, triumph of love, fall of Asgard, Balder the Beautiful. I mean, it's all there, but then it also goes on to a lot of the saga tales, you know, Siegfried and Nibelung's Gudrun's Vengeance. We've got the wonderful Rose Garden, the Land of the Giants. It's all in there. So I would highly recommend it. And it's also got what it calls plates in colour. And I love that because it's not just pictures, plates in colour. And we've got things like the Punishment of Loki, or the Binding of Loki, as I would call it, Freya and the Necklace. It's got Idun and her apples, another story that I tell. So this is a beautiful, beautiful old book, and it is Teutonic Myth and Legend by Donald A. Mackenzie. And in one moment, sometimes you just need to smell the old book. That's how good this book is. So if you can actually find one of these, I would highly recommend it. They might have brought it back out in print. I don't know. But I know there's this kind of whole series that are bound this way. It's bound in this kind of green book with a kind of gold leaf writing in print. And I've seen quite a few in different genres. So I would highly recommend that if you can get a hold of it. If you really like a big book on Norse myths and some of the sagas, definitely pick up Teutonic Myth and Legend by Donald A. Mackenzie. Now, as always, after our book recommendation, we move on to our podcast recommendation. And as you know, we are a member of the Alberta Podcast Network. And if you haven't heard of that yet, do head over to their website, where you can find a huge list of podcasts from all over the province of Alberta. And it's a fantastic thing. I am now a member. We are sponsored by it. It's a phenomenal thing to be a part of. And the recommendation I'd like to make for this episode's podcast recommendation is a good friend, Kyle Marshall. Kyle is a bit of a powerhouse. He is doing a lot of podcasting and stuff, but he also runs Media Lab YYC. So one of the podcasts that he's now got up and running is actually, I had a podcast of this name. Not just an episode, but Creative Block. I had Creative Roadblocks, but Media Lab presents Creative Block. And it's Kyle Marshall of Media Lab YYC interviews artists and entrepreneurs about where they came from, what they're doing now, and where they want to go. Now, Kyle is just a delight to listen to, so I would highly recommend heading over to the Alberta Podcast Network, finding his podcast, Creative Block, and basically giving it a listen. But bear in mind, he has his business, and it all is done out of Media Lab YYC, which is downtown in Calgary. And it's a place that if you've ever wanted to dabble in video production or even podcasting or things like that, get in touch with Kyle, because he has the facilities to help you out there. But my recommendation for this episode of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast is Creative Block by Kyle Marshall and Media Labs YYC. And it's all about entrepreneurs, about where they came from, what they're doing now, and where they want to go. That is my podcast recommendation. So there you go, folks. Another episode of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. Another Viking spectacular. I hope I gave you enough. I mean, just regaling you with some of the adventures of over the summer. The fights, the fun, the chaos, the storms. It's all there, and there's more to come. So I hope you are enjoying these episodes of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. We now have our studio. We're getting things ready. As I say, I've got to find this blasted kind of reverbing echo. I've done everything I thought it was, but it's still there. And I can hear it, and it's really annoying me. I just hope you can't hear it as much. Anyway, we will be having more episodes coming up shortly. I was actually hoping to do a special Halloween live, but time just got away with me. I'm trying to juggle so many baskets of peaches. Is that the expression? I don't know. What it is now. I'm juggling so many baskets of peaches. It's very complicated at the moment. Anyway, I love doing what I do. I hope you're enjoying it. Do bear in mind, if you do enjoy the podcast, head over to our Patreon page, the Bothy Storytelling Podcast, and basically, become a member of it. Support it. Help me develop it. Help me progress it. I might need more funds to rip out my studio and rebuild it and find out where this blasted echo is coming from. It's possibly like a cavern underneath me where dwarfs have been digging for gold. I don't know. I will need... In fact, you know what? I'm going to probably just start digging down now, and we'll figure that out. Even if it's not dwarfs, we might find gold. How awesome would that be? And then I wouldn't need help through the Patreon page. But if you are interested in helping me, all I'm asking you for is the price of a coffee from a place like Starbucks or the Second Cup, because they're all bloody expensive. So is Canada. Love it. But yeah, Vikings, fun, happiness, the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see, hear, and expect you all at the next episode of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. Until then, much love, have fun.